My name is John Dawson, and I'm going to demonstrate how to do an engraving print using a plexiglass plate. An engraving from a plexiglass plate is very similar to an engraving from a copper plate or a dry point from a copper plate. The biggest difference really is that you can't get really near as many prints from a plexiglass plate as you could from a copper plate. But engraving a plexiglass plate is much easier to do than using copper. So I'll show all the different things you need and how to proceed. Okay, we're going to make a brace. If you don't get anything else out of this video, please remember, don't use the engraving tool and move it toward your hand or your arm. They're very sharp and they're very prone to slipping and skipping, and you could really seriously hurt yourself. So that's why we're going to make a brace. So what we have here, I have a piece of particle board. You could use any flat piece of wood. A couple of pieces of doorstop. We have some screws. We have a few brads, a drill, a hammer, and a carpenter square, and some duct tape. So we'll get started. Okay, there are two configurations you can use for this. You can do it in a regular L shape like this, or you can do it in a shape that's like this. Now, I'm right-handed, so I move from right to left. If you're left-handed, then you would want to do it the reverse. You'd want to put it over here and then probably shift this like that. Okay, on this one, we're going to make the configuration like this. So what we want to do is take the carpenter square, so we make sure we have a good right angle, and lines, and we line up the doorstop on the line. We're going to put some brads in. I'm not going to nail it all the way down. I'm just going to nail it down far enough in order to keep it from slipping or moving. Then we're going to drill some guide holes. Now we're going to screw down the doorstop. You could nail it down, but there are a couple reasons the screws are better. One is it holds the doorstop more securely, and if you ever want to change the configuration, it's an easy thing to do, to just take the screws out and then reconfigure it however you like. Now we take the little brads out. When I first made a brace like this, I made them to do linoleum block prints or wood cuts, and if you notice, they're very thick and they fit into the brace very nicely. However, plexiglass is much thinner, and it has a tendency to get caught between the doorstop and the particle board. And it's not really that much of a problem. It's really just more of an annoyance. And A simple way to fix that is to take a piece of duct tape and you just set it down and push it down there at the crack between the particle board and the doorstop, and that keeps it from getting caught underneath the doorstop. Now that we're finished making the brace, I'm going to go through the different materials you're going to need for your etching on or engraving on plexiglass. First of all, of course, you're going to need plexiglass. I would recommend getting 2 pieces, both the same size, exactly the same size, and I'll show you a use for the second piece later in the video. Now this is 8 by 10. And if you're doing this for the first time, I would suggest you get something small like 8 by 10 or smaller. These are the engraving tools. They're all going to look pretty much alike on the video. You're going to need about 3 or maybe 4 different tools. The first kind is an angle tint tool, and these first tools that I'm going to show you are the sharp needle tools that are good for making lines in the plexiglass, and any one of these sharp needle tools is probably sufficient. There are a number of different kinds. This is an angle tint tool. This is a number 1. This would be a good one to get. I also have a number 3 angle tint tool. This is an elliptical tool, and it's also number 1. This could be a good possibility. And then this is a number 5 V-shaped burin. They call them V-shape or diamond shape because of the shape of the face on the front of it. And this is also would be a good one to use for doing the etched lines. Any one of those sharp tools, sharp pointed tools would be fine. This is a square graver, and I would suggest getting one of each of these. This is a number 40, and this is a number 46. Now the difference between the numbers on this is very minimal, so any one of these, if it's a number 1, number 2, number 40, number 39, the difference is very minimal. And then the final thing is these are etching engraving needles. This is actually called a litho needle, and if you're going to get this one, I would get the pencil style. This is a number 5, and I actually have this for etching, and it's a little big. A number 3 would probably be better. And this is a steel engraving needle, and if you're only going to get one, this is a little more expensive, but the steel needle is sharper, and you can get better cross-hatching lines, a little better cross-hatching lines than the litho needle. It comes in a number of different styles. And then these are other kinds of tools that sort of work, but they're kind of expensive. These other tools range from about $8 or $9 up to around $20. This is a diamond-shaped burin. I don't think it works that well. This is a mezzotint rocker. These are expensive. They're around $50 a piece, and unless you have it on hand, I wouldn't bother to get them. They work on the plexiglass, but they're hard to use, and I don't think they're worth the money. These are different kinds of roulettes. All of these tools can be obtained. The best place, and practically the only place, to get them is Graphic Chemical, and I'll put up their website so you can have that. On going on to the Graphic Chemical website, it has a lot to be desired. If you're going to try and find any of these things, you have to be specific or you'll never find anything. So you'll have to ask for or search for a angle tint tool or square graver, etc., to actually find them on their website. The other things you're going to need is you're going to need a Sharpie. Any color will probably work, but black would probably be best. A couple of these would probably be good. Then you're going to need denatured alcohol. You're going to need some paper towels. You're going to need a file. And you're going to need a couple of clamps. So the next thing we'll do is bevel the edges on the plexiglass in order to protect the blankets in your press when it goes through the press. Beveling the plate is really very easy. You're going to take a couple of pieces of cardboard or mat board, put it on top of the plate, and apply the clamps for using the cardboard so you won't damage or scratch the plate. And then simply run a file along the edge, creating a beveled edge. You're going to want to do all four edges and round the corners. Once the beveling is finished, then you want to turn the plate over and identify the back of the plate in some way. I usually just write back on the back of the plate. This way you won't get it mixed up later with the front or beveled side of the plate. Well, if you have a preliminary drawing that you're going to do the engraving from, this is the one I'm going to use. One of the ways that you can use to get it onto the plate is photograph it or scan it, put it in the computer, flip it, and then print it. This, of course, only work if the drawing that you're going to use is small enough that your printer can accommodate it. We're going to do 3 different ways to do this. This is the first one. And then once it's printed, make sure it's in reverse, because when you print, you want the print to come out like the original drawing. So you take the print, the computer print, and you put it on the back of your plexiglass plate, and then just simply take a little bit of Scotch tape and you tape it down. So it won't move. And then, as you'll see later, we will just etch along these lines that you can see through the plexiglass. So that's the first one. Now I'll show a couple others that you can do if the drawing you're using is too large to print out of the printer, or you don't have access to a computer and printer or a program that will flip the image to start with. Okay, if you're not able to make a copy of your drawing in the computer, or it's too large, another way to do this is to take a piece of tracing paper and put it over the top of your drawing. I'm using a light box. You don't necessarily have to have a light box. If anyone's interested, I show how to make a light box out on YouTube. So you just make a tracing of your original drawing. It helps to use a soft drawing pencil like a 6B or a 5B pencil, so you can get some nice dark lines. And once the tracing is finished, I'm going to take it off of here. I'm going to remove the original drawing, and then I have to turn it upside down again in the light box if you're using one. And you have to redraw it on the other side so that you can easily see it. You're going to do this because it has to be in reverse, so that when you do the engraving and you print it, it's going to come out like the original drawing. All right, once the tracing is finished, you're going to cut it to the size of the plate. And then we're going to do the same thing that we did with the computer print. You're going to tape it to the back of the plate, and with a little Scotch tape. And now we have a drawing attached to the plexiglass that we can use for a guide to engrave the lines. Now another way to do this is you're going to need a Sharpie, and you take the plexiglass, put it over the top of your drawing, face down, so you're drawing on the back of the plexiglass. And then you just use the Sharpie to draw in the lines. We'll just do a part of this. Now, when you turn it over, it's going to be in reverse, just like you need it to be in order to, etch the lines into the front of the plate. If you make a mistake, or if you want to take the Sharpie drawing off, you just need a little bit of alcohol. Oops. On a paper towel, and it wipes right off. So that's 3 different methods that you can use for engraving your drawing onto the front of the plexiglass. We're going to start by doing some basic lines. You want to hold the tool almost parallel to the plate, and when you push it into the plexiglass, you're going to want to kind of wiggle it a little bit and move it right along. This is an elliptical tool. This is a number 3, and one of the first things you're going to notice when you do this is that the lines that you make are going to be very hard to see. We'll just do a little piece here. And now, one of the reasons that I suggested that you get 2 square gravers is that if you want to make this line that I just did deeper and darker, you take the square graver and you kind of hold it at an angle, so you just get the tip in there. This is the larger one. And then you can regouge that same line that you just made, and you make it a little bigger and deeper. If that's what you think you need. Okay. All right, like I said, one of the things you're going to notice right away is it's very difficult to see any line that you've made, especially if you have an area like this where the hair is. Now, normally I would kind of begin to outline this a little bit before I started to do the actual strands of hair in from the drawing. But since I want to show how this works, you take a Sharpie and you just kind of fill it in. We'll just do a portion of this so you get the idea. You fill that area that you're going to do in with the Sharpie. I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm just going to do part of it. And actually, it's probably just as well to do a little portion at a time. Makes it easier to see. And you take the same tool that I had before, and you can make the lines then that you would have to create the lines of the hair in the engraving. And I don't know if you can see it on the video, but you can clearly see now the lines that you've made with the tool. And if you want those deeper and darker, you do the same thing with the square graver. Just you go in and kind of follow that line around again, and you make a deeper, darker line. And that you may be able to actually see that pretty clearly. So when you want to remove that that black area that you put in there after you're done etching all the lines in it that you want, then you can just wipe it off with a little alcohol on a paper towel. Now, once again, I would normally etch the lines around this dark area that I want to be mostly black, but to save time, I'm just going to demonstrate this and how it works. Once again, you're going to fill in the dark area, the black area that you want to engrave, and to get some nice blacks, to the extent that you can actually get nice blacks. It's kind of hard. You take these engraving needles. This is the steel needle, and you begin to make crosshatch lines. And it's a little tedious because you're going to keep doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it until it's probably going to print as dark as you can probably get it. That's the steel engraving needle. This is the litho engraving needle, and it works pretty good too. I think the steel one works a little better. This pencil style, though, is a little easier to hold, so it's kind of a matter of personal taste. So, and then once again, once you're done with the black area that you put in there with the Sharpie, you can just wipe it out again with alcohol on a paper towel. Okay, if you have an area like have on this bird where you want a little more complicated kind of pattern or texture, you just fill in. We're just going to fill in part of this again. Normally I do probably most of the whole section of the bird, and just going to do a little piece here, and you're going to do a little bit of use both tools. First, use the elliptical sharp pointed tool to make some basic lines. Just going to do a small little tiny section, just give you an idea how this works. And then you take the etching needle and you kind of go over the top of that, where you can create different kinds of patterns this way. Then, in areas that you want to be shaded, not necessarily black, but just shaded, take the, once again, we're going to darken this in so you can see what you're doing. And you take the one of the etching needles, and you just make a series of lines, and depending on how deep and how many, it's going to kind of give you an indication of the shading that you might want. Kind of similar to dry point that you would do normally on a copper plate. So that'll give you an idea of how you can get some shaded areas and some more complicated kinds of patterns with the engraving needle and the etching tool. After you've done a number of engraved lines, you'll notice that there are a lot of little burrs that stick up from the areas that you've gouged into the plexiglass. And to remove those, you want to take the larger square graver, and you kind of hold it down on the plexiglass flat, almost flat, maybe at a slight angle, and then you just move it across the plate until you remove all those little burrs. You can, it's hard to see them, but you can feel them where they're at, and just clean them off. So that's really the basic things that you need to know about how to actually do the engraving part of this on the plexiglass plate. The printing of the plate is essentially the same as printing and etching. I use leftover pieces of mat board that I cut into small squares to apply the ink, and then to remove the ink. Next, I use a tarlatan to wipe down the plate, and then the next thing I use is a piece of cheesecloth to wipe down the next layer of ink off. And finally, I use a piece of newsprint, usually pages from an old phone book, to wipe down the last of the ink from the plate. If you have areas that you think are too dark and you'd like to lighten them a little bit, you can use something like a Q-tip to pull out some of the ink. And if you have some unwanted scratches that you'd like to try to remove, a paper towel can be real helpful. Next, just like with an etching, you have to soak the paper for 15 or 20 minutes and then blot it dry. Now you're ready to print the plate. Okay, when you're finished, you clean the plate pretty much the way you do any etching or intaglio plate with paint thinner. However, because the plastic engraving has so many small little grooves and scratches, a toothbrush can be real handy in cleaning the plate to get all those little tiny grooves and so forth cleaned out. Well, in the beginning of the video, I suggested you get an extra piece of plexiglass that's exactly the same size as the first one. You're going to have to bevel the edges and then be sure to mark the back of the plate so you can tell which side is which. And then I'm going to show you a way that we can make color prints. The first thing we need to do is to take the initial plate, the key plate, and we turn it upside down so it's face down, so the back is up. And then you take the second plexiglass plate and you turn it upside down So the back is up, and place it on top of the key plate. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of tape and just slightly tape it down so it doesn't move. And I'm going to take a Sharpie, and we're going to isolate the forms on the back of the extra plexiglass plate. Now once we've removed the tape and turned the extra plexiglass plate over, you'll see that the image is now in reverse, which is what we need for the next step. Now I'm going to mix some colors. I'm using regular oil paint. You could use etching ink or even litho ink if you have enough different colors available. Sometimes I've used white etching ink as a base and then mixed oil paint into that. So I have a number of colors mixed here, and now we're going to go on to the next step. Now we're going to paint in the various areas on the extra plate that you want to be in color. I'm starting out with the flesh tones for the face and so forth, and then painting in the robe, and finally the hawk. Now we'll go on to print this plate and let it dry, and then we'll be printing the key plate on top of it. This is the color plate once it's printed. You have to repaint the color plate each time for every print that you plan to do, for as many prints that you plan to have in the edition. For something like this, I use a fairly simple registration method. If you want a tighter registration, you'll probably need to use something a little more sophisticated than this. As I've tried to show on this diagram, on a piece of mylar, draw a line for the paper, and then, leaving whatever size border you like, draw a line for the plate. Then on the paper, make a mark on all four sides and a corresponding mark on the mylar. Be sure to mark one edge differently so that you put the paper down in the right direction each time. Now you're going to print the engraved key plate on top of the already printed color plate, and this should result in a nice color print. This method for doing a color plate is essentially a monoprint process. And generally speaking, I think monoprints print better when you don't soak the paper. But because the key plate, the engraved plate, has to be printed on paper that you soaked and blotted dry, it's best really if you soak the paper from both the monoprint plate and the key plate. When you soak the paper and put it through the press, it has a tendency to change the configuration of the paper slightly. And if you don't soak the paper for both, it can create some registration problems. Now, there are other methods for coloring your prints. You can hand paint them. When I do it, I usually use oil paints, which works well. A buddy of mine who does etchings, he uses watercolors to hand paint his prints, and that works real well also. Well, that about does it for this one. We'll follow this up with some other examples of prints of mine, and the web address for my web page and Facebook page. And if you're interested, you can also subscribe to other videos of mine on YouTube.